Finally, the typical Champions League anthem can be heard again at St. James' Park, understandably, since 2 decades ago the stadium no longer plays the anthem. The stadium, the pride of the people of Newcastle, also feels special because it witnessed the collapse of the French giant PSG. It's not just a coincidence that the Mapace makes the league play the farmer was battered. Of course, there were several effective methods used by the Ton Army, which was clearly the method that Booklim and his friends just stared at as their club was completely destroyed by children yesterday afternoon in the Champions League. Newcastle's 4-1 landslide victory over PSG in the round. The Champions League group was the first and biggest victory for Newcastle in the Champions League. Ton Army's last victory in the Champions League occurred precisely on February 26, 2003 when Ton Army won over Bayer Leverkusen 31 at St. James' Park. At that time their star Alan Shearer scored a hat-trick if you count. The calculation turns out that for 7,525 days Newcastle must win again in the Champions League. This victory is also about goals. Yes, Newcastle's first goal in the Champions League since 20 years ago was finally scored by a player who looks like Ratati Dika Miguel Almiron, because the last goal was scored by the MPC in the Champions League. Occurred on March 11, 2003 when it was Alan Shearer who scored a goal in the match against Inter Milan at the San Siro. One of the things that made Newcastle perform well in the Champions League is their focus in this competition, understandably Newcastle.
Domestic league this season, the start was not good. They lost to teams like City and Brighton and only won against mediocre teams like Brentford, Sheffield, Aston Villa, and Burnley. Wants to present the best to its supporters. For a long time not participating in this competition, The Athletic said that Newcastle's European competition focus was proven. We know that in Newcastle's. Eddie Howe also expressed the same thing in the Chronicle Live media. There, Howe admitted that he was not afraid of facing a deadly group in the Champions League this season. In fact, he was very happy to be able to meet big teams. Their enthusiasm is a bit different in the domestic league and Champions League. Usually clubs like Newcastle, after winning against a big club like PSG, they generally play defensively to secure their lead, but not for Newcastle in the second half. Even though they were 2-0 up, they still continued to bombard PSG's defense mercilessly. Team spirit is also closely related to the coach's motivation. Apart from having a specific target in Europe, Coach Eddie Howe's attitude in increasing his team to beat PSG, Howe said, Newcastle's defense ahead of facing PSG was in good condition, especially their team's winning trend is currently maintained. They are unbeaten since they last lost to Brighton in early September. They even won big 8-0 over Sheffield and beat Manchester City in the Carabao Cup. Apart from the optimism factor, there is another factor of 2 Newcastle native players named Den and Sean Longstaff. The 2 blonde players are 2 original players. Are 2 original players born in Newcastle. They have also been Newcastle fans since they were little. Understandably, their extended families have also been hardline Newcastle supporters for a long time. When it comes to loyalty and sacrifice, from local children, there's no doubt that it's totally like they're ready to die to defend the club. This is what is reflected in the tireless spirit of Byrne and Longstaff in the match against PSG, and it is good that Howe is smart in utilizing this.